A hotel releases a surveillance video to help find a missing guest. Instead, it becomes one of the most watched pieces of found footage in internet history, viewed millions of times within days, translated, subtitled, dissected frame by strangers around the world who had never heard her name before that week. A young woman steps into an elevator. She presses every button on the panel. She steps out, looks both ways down an empty hallway, like she's checking if someone's following her. She steps back in. She hides in the corner, pressing herself against the wall. She makes strange, jerking hand movements, like she's talking to someone who isn't there. The doors open and close. Open and close. She never leaves the frame. 18 days later, hotel guests start complaining that their water tastes strange. Comes out brown, tastes like metal. A maintenance worker climbs onto the roof to check the tanks. What he finds inside one of them is Elisa Lam. This is the case that broke the internet before true crime had an internet to break it on. Inside a hotel, its own long-term residents had nicknamed the suicide, long before she ever checked in. And somehow, over a decade later, we still don't fully agree on what happened to her. Elisa Lam was 21 years old, a student from Vancouver, British Columbia, working her way through a degree at the University of British Columbia. Friends described her as bright, a little quirky, the kind of person who kept a detailed blog about her daily life, food, moods, small observations, the ordinary texture of being a young woman figuring herself out. She'd also been open, in her own way, about living with bipolar disorder and depression. She was on medication for it, managing it, or trying to. In January 2013, Elisa set off on a solo trip down the West Coast, a kind of loosely planned adventure with stops in San Diego, then Los Angeles, before she was due to continue north to Santa Cruz to meet up with friends. Solo travel, a backpack, a blog she updated along the way. Nothing about it suggested tragedy was coming. Then she checked into the Cecil Hotel. If you wanted to build a haunted hotel from scratch, you'd struggle to write something darker than the Cecil's actual history. Opened in 1924 in downtown Los Angeles, right on the edge of Skid Row, the Cecil was built for a different city, one of jazz-age optimism. That didn't last. The Great Depression hit, the neighborhood declined, and the hotel became known for something else entirely: death. At least 16 deaths, a mix of murders and suicides, have been documented inside its walls since it opened, enough that long-term residents started calling it the suicide as a grim in joke. Guests jumped from its windows. Guests were found dead under circumstances nobody ever fully explained. Richard Ramirez, the serial killer known as the Night Stalker, stayed there during his 1985 killing spree, reportedly slipping in through a side door still wearing blood-stained clothes, tossing them in a dumpster down the block. Jack Unterweger, an Austrian journalist and convicted murderer, stayed there too on a magazine assignment, while he killed at least 3 sex workers in the surrounding neighborhood. By the time Elisa Lam walked through its doors in January 2013, the Cecil had rebranded parts of itself into a budget hostel, drawing backpackers and international tourists who often had no idea what they'd booked into. She checked in on January 26th. She was staying in a shared hostel-style room at first. Within 2 days, several of her roommates asked staff to move her. They described her as acting erratically, unsettling enough that they didn't want to keep sharing the space. Hotel staff obliged and moved her into a private room on the same floor. Nobody's ever confirmed whether that behavior was connected to her mental health, a bad reaction to being off her medication, or something else entirely. In hindsight, it reads like an early warning sign nobody was positioned to catch. The days that followed are pieced together mostly from hotel staff, a few guests, and her blog, which eerily kept updating with ordinary posts almost until the end. On January 31st, staff say they saw her for the last time in the lobby. That same day, her family back in Vancouver, who she'd been in regular contact with, stopped hearing from her. They tried calling. Nothing. They contacted the Los Angeles Police Department. Officers came to the Cecil, checked her room. Her belongings were still there. Her passport, her identification. No sign that she checked out, packed up, or planned to go anywhere. A guest with no luggage and no goodbye is one kind of missing person case. A guest who leaves everything behind, including the ID she'd need to fly home, is something else. With nothing else to go on, LAPD did what investigators sometimes do as a last resort. They released hotel surveillance footage to the public, hoping someone, somewhere, had seen her. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The clip is short, under 3 minutes. Grainy black and white security footage, time-stamped in the early hours of February 1st. Elisa steps into the elevator. She presses several buttons at once, more than any normal person needs to. She steps out, looks both ways down the hallway, then steps back inside, pressing herself into the corner, as far from the door as she can get. Then her hands start moving. Fast, erratic gestures, like she's talking to someone or gesturing at someone just out of frame. The doors open, close, open again. They never fully shut on her. She never actually leaves. Released to a public already primed by decades of Cecil Hotel folklore, the video did exactly what LAPD hoped, and then some. Within 10 days, it had over 3 million views in China alone, and more than 40,000 comments. Dozens of reposts followed, some with amateur voiceovers laying out theories. The most watched version on YouTube would eventually rack up close to 12 million views. Amateur investigators paused every frame, zoomed into every shadow, convinced they could see a hand reaching in from off camera, a second person just out of shot. Proof of a struggle the elevator's fixed camera simply didn't capture. The most popular theory, someone else was in that hallway with her. Someone the camera never saw. Other footage from her stay only fed the speculation. Separate surveillance clips showed her interacting with 2 men elsewhere in the hotel days earlier, later identified as employees from a nearby bookstore who'd simply helped her carry a purchase back to her room. Investigators cleared them almost immediately. Online, they stayed suspects for years anyway. For 19 days, that video was the last confirmed sighting of Elisa Lam, and nobody could explain it. By mid-February, guests at the Cecil started complaining. The water pressure was low. It tasted metallic. It was coming out of the tap discolored. On February 19th, a maintenance worker climbed the ladder to the hotel's rooftop water tanks to investigate. There were 4 tanks up there, each roughly 10 feet tall, sealed with heavy lids, requiring a scramble up a ladder just to reach the top. He opened one. Elisa Lam's body was inside. The Los Angeles Fire Department had to cut a hole in the side of the tank to remove her, along with her clothes, which were found floating in the water beside her. She had been missing for 19 days. She had, in all likelihood, been in that tank the entire time, while dozens of guests below showered, brushed their teeth, and drank water drawn from the same system. The question that made headlines around the world: how does a 21-year-old woman end up inside a sealed rooftop water tank, alone, with no visible way to have climbed in by herself? It got stranger. Investigators later noted that when they reached the roof, the tank's heavy lid was found closed. If Elisa had climbed in on her own, in the middle of a psychiatric crisis, she would have had to haul herself over the rim and then somehow pull the lid shut behind her. That single detail became the foundation for almost every foul play theory that followed. Here's what should have been a straightforward case turned into a months-long forensic puzzle. The coroner's office couldn't complete a full autopsy right away. 19 days submerged in water had caused significant decomposition. What they could determine: no signs of physical trauma, no indication of sexual assault, No stab wounds, no blunt force injuries, nothing consistent with a physical struggle. Toxicology results came back with no illegal drugs and no significant alcohol in her system, just trace amounts of her prescribed psychiatric medication, and notably, at levels lower than what should have been in her system given how many pills remained unused in her hotel room. In other words, she appeared to be under-medicated relative to her prescription. It took months. The coroner's office initially listed her cause of death as undetermined while they finished their investigation. In June 2013, they issued a final ruling: accidental drowning with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing condition. The theory investigators settled on: Elisa, off her medication or under-medicated, experienced a manic or psychotic episode. In that state, she made her way onto the roof, through a stairwell door that, according to hotel staff, wasn't properly wired to its alarm at the time, climbed the ladder to the tank, and got in. LAPD Detective Wallace Tinnell put it plainly in a later deposition. In his opinion, she'd fallen off her medication, and in that state found her way onto the roof and into the tank. No suspect was ever named. No motive for foul play was ever established. No physical evidence of a second person was ever found. For a lot of people, that ruling didn't feel like an answer. It felt like a door closing on a mystery that should have had a scarier, more concrete explanation. Part of that is the Cecil itself, a building with enough real horror in its history that people were primed to believe something sinister was always lurking in its halls. Part of it is the elevator footage, genuinely unsettling to watch, ambiguous enough that any viewer can project their own theory onto it. Part of it is Skid Row's own reputation, a neighborhood so associated with danger that people assumed a stranger, not a medical crisis, had to be responsible. And part of it is a string of eerie coincidences that theorists treated as clues. Investigators learned Elisa had reportedly left behind notes for her former roommates that some described as threatening, never made fully public, and never tied to any actual confrontation, but enough to add another unsettling data point to an already strange picture. Then there's the tuberculosis angle. At the exact time Elisa was staying at the Cecil, there was a real, documented tuberculosis outbreak in Skid Row, and health workers were on the ground running diagnostic tests. One of those tests was called LAM-ELISA, which sounds like her name, but isn't one. It's simply an acronym for its full technical name, a laboratory immune assay used to detect the disease. The coincidence was real. The conspiracy built on top of it, that Elisa was secretly used as a human test subject and eliminated as part of a cover-up, was not. A low-budget horror film called Dark Water, released years before her death, featured a plot involving a body found in a rooftop water tank. Another eerie coincidence, and nothing more. None of it is evidence. It's pattern matching, the human brain's instinct to find meaning in coincidence, especially when a story is already this unsettling. But the coincidence hunting had a real casualty. Online sleuths seized on a death metal musician who performed under the stage name Morbid, a name that superficially echoed Elisa Lam, after discovering he'd stayed at the Cecil the year before her death. He had no connection to Elisa whatsoever. He wasn't even in the country when she died. That didn't stop internet detectives and at least one international outlet from naming him a suspect. He faced years of harassment and death threats, which flared up again in 2021 when Netflix's docuseries, Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, reignited interest in the case. That same documentary was later criticized for spending hours walking through the very theories it claimed to debunk. It's one of the clearest examples of what happens when a mystery this compelling meets an internet willing to convict on vibes. A real, innocent person paid the price for a coincidence he had nothing to do with. What the actual record shows is less cinematic, but arguably sadder. A young woman managing a serious mental illness, alone in an unfamiliar city, far from the support system that might have caught the warning signs, who experienced a psychiatric crisis with nobody around to intervene. Her family pursued a wrongful death and negligence lawsuit against the hotel, arguing that inadequate security, including that stairwell door alarm, which staff later confirmed hadn't been properly monitored, allowed her to reach the roof in the first place. A judge dismissed the case in 2015, ruling the hotel couldn't be held liable for a death investigators had determined was accidental and driven by Elisa's own medical crisis, not any failure to secure the building. Elisa Lam didn't become famous for anything she did in her 21 years. She became a symbol for internet mystery culture, for the Cecil's dark mythology, for true crime's obsession with unanswered questions. But underneath the elevator footage and the conspiracy forums and the water tank folklore, there was a real person, a student, a blogger, a daughter who called her parents regularly, until one day she didn't. Someone managing a mental illness that, in the wrong moment, in the wrong city, with nobody watching, became fatal. The official record says accident. The internet has spent over a decade saying maybe not. What we can say for certain is this: somewhere between a locked stairwell door and a sealed rooftop tank, in the early hours of a February morning, something went catastrophically wrong for Elisa Lam. And the full human truth of those final hours may have died with her. The world watched her final minutes on a loop for over a decade, searching that grainy footage for a killer. Maybe the real tragedy was simpler and harder to look at. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room isn't someone hiding in the frame. It's the illness no one on the other side of the camera could see.